What's up everyone? Lou back with another video, and today I want to talk to you about my experiences as a snakehead fisherman. As a guy who caught his first snakehead only a year ago, and before that I was trying to catch snakehead for like a whole decade, not really on and off. I didn't have that much time to go fishing, but every time I went fishing I was trying to catch snakehead and I couldn't. And of course that's when I started going through watching YouTube videos, reading articles, going through Facebook threads, forums, and trying to figure out, hey, how do I catch northern snakehead? What are the best tactics? And of course, all the usual suspects are there. You want to throw a hollow body frog, you need a heavy ass rod, minimum, medium heavy, the whole 9 yards. You need 50 pounds a test, at least 65-pound test or whatever, or else they're going to break your line. Their teeth is going to cut your line off. And to be quite honest, I have not broke any lines catching snakehead. I've caught 10 snakeheads. So I caught my first one last year. I caught 4 last year. I caught 6 this year so far. That is 10. And I'm not telling you that I'm like some super experienced fisherman. I'm just some standard D-bag who goes fishing. I'm telling you, this is what I've noticed. So sure, you go in kayaks or whatever, and you go to murky water, let's say black water, right? Black water refuge is somewhere in the eastern shores of Maryland that holds a lot of snakehead, and a lot of people go fish there. Or Mattawoman Creek, or any of these other like creeks, shallow water, murky, muddy, weedy areas. Those are like probably the 95% of 95% of times you're going to see people catching snakeheads out of waters like this. And sure, this is where hollow body frogs of whatever color works. Your noisy buzzbaits, your noisy chatterbaits work. I caught my first snakehead on a chatterbait in very muddy water. Of course that works because the visibility is low. The fish hears the vibration, feels the vibration, and it goes there and it sees something shining and shimmering within that murky water, and it's going to strike, right? The problem is, what happens when the fish doesn't eat? What happens if the water isn't murky? What happens if the water is clear? Where I go fishing, that's most convenient for me, it's like half an hour away from my house, it's in lakes. So nowadays snakeheads have spread everywhere. They're not just in rivers and creeks anymore. They're in local lakes. Pretty much every lake you could think of that is in and around the Chesapeake Bay, westward, eastward, has snakehead. And a lot of times these lakes are clear water. They have a lot of vegetation, they have a lot of grass and hydrilla, and the water has very good visibility. I'm talking to probably at least 3 or 4, 5 feet of visibility. You go up further up your creeks, like let's say the Patapsco, you go further up the Patapsco where the creek is maybe 1, 2, 3 feet of water, and that is really clear. How do you catch those snakeheads? And of course, these lakes are pressured. A lot of these lakes are like neighborhood ponds. People fish there all the time. They see people walk back and forth. They see frogs all day. They're very pressured fish. How do you go about catching them? What I have found is that they're like no different than bass. They are really smart fish. And if you throw at them a pink frog that you see a bunch of other dudes on Facebook catching all these snakehead on pink frogs, you're not going to catch them on pink frogs here. They're going to look at that pink frog and they're going to swim away. How do I know this? Because I was throwing a white frog that I've been catching a bunch of snakehead on. When I throw it on top of a matted grass, meaning like top cover, all the fish sees is this little thing just bouncing along matted grass. They don't see what it looks like. They just know something is there and they'll strike it. Problem is when you're trying to like roll that over on the side of cover, but in the water, the fish will see it. And if they don't react to it, they'll look at it and then they'll swim away. I've seen these snakeheads stare at my white hollow body frog, swim up to it, touch it with his mouth, not even opening his mouth, just touching it and then swimming off. I've seen this fish look at me from 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet away, come up to the shoreline, look at me, and then swim away. It's crazy. Like, it's a weird thing. I don't think any other fish does this that I've ever experienced. I don't ever see bass do this. Only snakehead do this. And it leads me to believe that their eyesight is actually really good, and they are a lot smarter than you think. I think a lot of times you see these fish swimming in that murky water, and a lot of, they're just reacting to sounds and sights. They don't really have too much time. They can't see things to react to it. It's almost like you in the dark. You know what I mean? If you're walking around in the dark and something touches you, you're going to start swinging. You're going to start, trying to hit them, get them off you. You react to things differently than when you're walking around daylight, because everything you can see, you could observe everything, you can see what's going on. And that's the thing with snakehead too. You have to slow your presentation down. You're going to have to use really realistic colors. What I've been using is a Z-Man color called the Deal. That been working really well for me. I haven't had too much luck with like green pumpkin and stuff, but generally speaking, the most realistic colors possible. I've had a straight up white swim bait, and I was twitching along, snakehead caught eye of it, came up to it, and I was twitching it. It looked at it, and then it swam away. It is absolutely nuts. So whatever color that you feel really looks like the forage that is in that particular body of water, that is what I'd go for. Like bluegill, shad, or whatever color, like just the most realistic color possible. And you're gonna have to fish it very slow. And you're gonna have to be able to cast further. So a lot of times those heavier lines, those heavier rods, they're not gonna cast as far as a lighter rod and with lighter line. So I've been catching most of my snakehead on medium rods. I've caught them on medium light rods. I've caught them with BFS gear. I've caught them with 20-pound tests, 30-pound tests, with 8-pound leader, 15-pound leaders. And the reason why I use this is because I feel like it is probably the limit in terms of like line strength, where I know that line is not going to break, but it also enables me to cast further, to stay further away from the fish so that they don't see me, because I fish a lot from the bank. And that's another thing. You don't need to buy a kayak these days to go fish for snakehead. There's a lot of shore opportunities if you know where to look. Obviously, try FishBrain, try going to Facebook forums, or just simply looking at Google Maps, Google Earths, and you find places to go fish. Pretty much, like I said, any body of water, lakes, rivers, creeks, will hold snakehead in them of various sizes. So you don't no longer need to go out. I have been out on my kayak several times, and I have never caught a snakehead on a kayak. I've caught all of my snakehead from the bank. So that's just telling you something. And hey, if I get skunked on the bank, it's actually not that bad, because lugging in my kayak, doing all this and getting skunked, it's really tiring. With the bank, I could be running errands, picking up my kids from school. I could just drive right on up to the bank for like half an hour, throw a couple lines out. If I catch something, I catch something. If I don't, no big deal. It's only 30 minutes, no problem. If you're on a kayak, sure. You got the heavy rod, you don't have to worry about nothing. And you're just throwing frogs at like murky water with a bunch of cover, great. But if you're fishing finicky snakehead, clear water, you're gonna have to start finessing that bait. You're gonna have to be able to cast further, and you're gonna have to start twitching really slow, whatever lure that you're throwing out there, your swim bait, your fluke, or whatever. And to be quite honest, the lighter rods, the lighter lines are just better at that, better at casting, and just better at presenting something slower. I don't know about you, but I feel like if I'm going out there with just a heavy rod, I'm really limiting my opportunities. Let's say I'm going with a heavy rod, medium heavy rod to the bank, and I'm able to throw a frog pretty decent, but then I kind of want to get that lure out a little further to this one spot, so I could like throw it past the fish and start twitching it back, to get a better presentation. I can't. But if I had something lighter, like a medium rod, I could throw the frog, and I could throw that lighter finesse soft plastic further to get a better presentation. I feel like I'd rather increase my chances of catching fish by being able to offer better presentation, getting the lure out to where it needs to be, than just being able to horse in a fish if I get one. I feel like in my experience, I feel like there's many times before where if I was just carrying around my medium heavy or heavy rod, I wouldn't have been able to catch the snakehead that I did, just based on the way I was able to cast the lure and the way I was able to present it with the lighter rod. Topwater frogs are as effective for snakehead as it is for bass, and I think a lot of snakehead fishermen like to use frogs because obviously it's really fun to catch any fish on topwater. But, and you know, secondly, where they're going for these snakehead is usually shallow, murky, very weedy water, and frogs are obviously very weedless, and you know, it's just like the easiest way to fish in that environment. But I think snakehead, like any other fish that you deal with, snakehead just like bass, you know, they eat things most of the time subsurface. You know, they're not blasting top water all day long. Most of the stuff that's in their stomach is fish, crustaceans, you know, bluegill, shad, things of that nature. Those are all subsurface eats. So,
on a Z-Man 2,
you know,
pretty sure no one throws a tube around.
Frogs are probably not like that a huge part of their diet. And then, you know, a lot of northern snakehead fishing, you might go on like YouTube and watch all these guys catching snakehead like in Florida, and they're twitching those frogs and stuff really fast. That's not going to work for northern snakehead. Northern snakehead prefers a lot slower presentation. They are not as aggressive as snakeheads are in Florida. I would compare them to like a largemouth bass versus smallmouth bass. The northern snakeheads can get a lot bigger, just like the largemouth bass can get a lot bigger. And those Florida snakehead are usually not as big as a northern snakehead, but they are a lot more aggressive once they're hooked, and the way they attack baits, same way as smallmouth bass are. So with northern snakehead, generally speaking, slower presentation. It's just, you just got to slow things down a little bit. And that's not to say that sometimes you're fishing a fast buzzbait or chatterbait or spinnerbait that's not going to work. It does work. Sometimes they just react to it. Same thing as a largemouth reacts to those same exact baits. It's just the majority of the time, if you want to increase your chances of catching the northern snakehead, you got to slow it down. And this is my opinion on how to fish northern snakehead, based on my own personal experience, and of course based on watching other fishermen on YouTube and people discuss about it. If you had to just buy one fishing rod to go fishing for snakehead, I would buy a medium power rod. And you know, if you're just starting off, go ahead and get a spinning rod and reel, because you could most likely throw frogs, pretty much anything, with a medium spinning rod. But if you want to use a casting rod, and you can use a casting rod, again, a medium casting rod with a reel that can throw a good vast majority of bait sizes and weights. So most bait casting reels are not good at casting light lures. So I would recommend something like, make sure when you're looking into the reel, it doesn't have to be BFS, because obviously BFS could throw light lures no problem. Just one of those lures that excels at casting a variety of weight, casting a variety of lure weights. Yeah, that is my take on how to catch northern snakehead here in the Mid-Atlantic region, DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Like literally lighten up your rod or line. Like, it's not always about just horsing it. Like, I see these guys, they catch these snakehead, right? It's great. They hook set, and that rod is so strong, it just flies right into their kayak. Or they hook set, and they just reel a few times, and it's in. And that is great. But it's almost like too fast. Like, the only part of fishing that is enjoyable for them is the fact that they found the fish and the hook set. But then the reel is just, it's done, you know? And again, with the lighter gear, you, one, can cast to more areas. Two, present your lure in a way that attracts more fish. And 3, obviously, increases your chances of getting that fish to bite and then hooking the fish. And then when you're reeling him in, there's a little bit more fight because that rod is not going to just muscle that fish in. And to be honest, I've seen these guys just completely like baseball swing, freaking Sammy Sosa, Babe Ruth action their rod to hook set a snakehead. I just been hooking snakeheads like this because the side of their cheeks are actually very soft. Like, it's not hard. And even frogs on the top of their mouth, like, it doesn't take much. Just a quick yank and it gets in there, you know. A lot of times when people miss snakehead is because they just don't have your lure. They just, for the frog, they might have just bit the blade on the bladed frog, or they just bit the legs on the frog, but they didn't take the whole lure. And then so when they do the hook set, they think their hook set wasn't strong enough, and the next time they're gonna have to do it stronger. No, you actually, if that snakehead has the lure in his mouth, you don't have to freaking like just blast him. You know, just a quick yank and it's in there. The only time you miss the snakehead, in my opinion, is if the snakehead didn't actually have the whole lure in its mouth. Like your paddle tail swim bait only has like the tail. It didn't have the whole thing in his mouth. And when you do the hook set, it's gonna completely miss. But if that bait is in his mouth, a pretty standard hook set, again, I've been hook setting snakehead on medium light rods no problem without like yanking the crap out of my rod. Yeah, it doesn't take much. So again, till next time, lighten up.
Hey, man, you go fishing for snakehead?
Yeah, I've caught a few snakeheads before, man, but it's not easy.
Oh my God, you're trap snakehead fishing so easy.
Oh yeah? How you do it?
If you want to be the best, if you want to be professional snakehead fisherman, you need to target the fry ball.
Hey, I've tried fry balls before. Sometimes they just won't bite.
Let me show you. The hook on the bait, it trapped.
Bro, are you sure about that? It seems like you got your foot just fine.
Call 911.